For nearly 2 years, my office has been investigating a legislative grant for the development of a health park complex in Clare County. We have charged David Coker Jr. of Clare with several felonies related to his management of this project, including conducting a criminal enterprise. Our office formally filed charges on Monday, May 12th, and Mr. Coker was arrested and arraigned yesterday, May 14th, in the 54A District Court in Lansing. The matter came to our attention as a referral in August of 2023 from the Department of Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General, following concerns brought to DHHS by state legislators warning of potential misconduct in several things: how the grant was secured, that the project manager and grant recipient, David Coker, had previously worked for once Speaker Jason Wentworth, who led the House of Representatives when the project was funded, that a current state representative, Tom Kuntz, who succeeded Jason Wentworth, owned the land purchased for the development of this project, and that a man named Anthony DeMasi had become involved in the health park project, despite DeMasi having served years in prison after he was convicted in 2010 on federal fraud charges. Our investigation did not establish criminal wrongdoing in this matter by Anthony DeMasi, Representative Kuntz, or former Speaker Wentworth, who were all cooperative in this investigation. By the time this matter came to us, the Department of Health and Human Services had already issued a stop work order to Coker and his organization. And since that date, in May of 2023, no work nor further funding have continued. David Coker was, by the time the fiscal year 2023 state budget was signed into law, a former legislative staffer of State Representative Jason Wentworth, having been employed at the House of Representatives in 2019 and in 2020. The legislative earmark was meant to accomplish the construction of a large healthcare complex described as a community health campus pilot project in Clare County to be developed by a nonprofit entity and consist of an integrated wellness facility that includes mental, physical, and behavioral health components, including, but not limited to, the ability to host tournaments and as many of the following services as possible: rehabilitation, optical, dental, primary care, urgent care, chiropractic, childcare, walking or running track, and multiple mixed-use courts. This campus was additionally supposed to include, at a minimum, indoor aquatics, gymnasium, and workout facilities, all in the same facility. As eventually signed into law in Section 1996 of the 2022 Public Act 166, this was intended to be a massive development, one that would deliver significant community need in this part of central Michigan, but also one that would require much to manage and see through all the way to fruition. And it would appear to be an inherently well-intentioned idea. However, in the hands of David Coker, it would never come to be. Upon being signed into law, the administration of this grant was assigned to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, who would soon receive a proposal from David Coker. Coker had established a nonprofit organization in the name of Complete Health Park in June of 2022, just 1 month before the budget bill was passed into law. In October, on behalf of the nonprofit, Coker submitted a grant proposal to MDHHS, establishing himself as the point of contact for the administrative agency assigned the grant. As required by law, he recruited community members Len Wixon, Terrence Powell, and Alex Stem to serve as the organization's board of directors. And they met formally for the first time on October 30th That same day, the board of directors voted to authorize Coker to open bank accounts and engage in financial transactions on behalf of the nonprofit that, again, he created for the express purpose of effectuating this single legislative grant. We believe this board effectively operated as a rubber stamp for Coker's later invoicing. Now, another entity, this one notably not a nonprofit, but a business, soon entered into the scene. And on November 2nd, the board of directors voted to approve a contract with the independent contractor IW Consulting to manage the development of the healthcare park. IW Consulting is a business establishment that was established in 2020 by David Coker, both the owner and registered agent, and through which Coker would bill the nonprofit Complete Health Park ostensibly for consulting and project management services. Having secured financial authority over the nonprofit Complete Health Park and locked in a contract between his personal business and the nonprofit he created and controlled, Coker would soon formalize receipt of the state grant. Without ever disclosing to MDHHS his ownership of IW Consulting or that he would be receiving grant funds through this arrangement, David Coker signed the formal grant agreement on December 15th, 2022, as the representative of the nonprofit Complete Health Park. 4 days later, on behalf of Complete Health Park, Coker then submitted to MDHHS a financial status report seeking disbursement of more than $9 million in grant funds for, among other things, the $3.5 million to purchase the land upon which the health park was intended to be built, and $820,000 listed as other expenses. These other expenses were in fact meant to cover 2 invoices from Coker's IW Consulting. On January 9th of 2023, $9.9 million was disbursed by the state agency grant administrator and deposited into a Complete Health Park bank account controlled by Coker. That same day, the other expenses in the sum of $820,632 was transferred by Coker from the Complete Health Park account to his IW Consulting account. We allege by our charges today that these invoices were fulfilled fraudulently for Coker having not disclosed his financial ties to the business and were only approved because Coker was both the agent of IW Consulting, authorizing the invoices, and the financial agent of CHP, approving the expenses to fulfill his invoices. We allege Coker represented these expenses to MDHHS to seek dispersal of the state-appropriated earmark funds without disclosing his financial relationship to IW Consulting, and that failure to make that disclosure violated conflict of interest stipulations pertaining to the grant and constitutes fraud. It is our allegation that Coker constructed this arrangement from the very onset to be the financial agent of both entities and the representative of the grant recipient to the state agency grant administrator in order to acquire for himself what we allege to be significant stolen sums. Once he transferred the funds from the Complete Health Park account to the IW Consulting account, he began emptying the business account into his own personal accounts, and very soon began paying off his personal debts and making extravagant purchases with that money, such as 4 vehicles, including a 2023 Honda ORV and a 2024 Chevrolet Trax, over 70 silver, gold, and platinum bars, eagles, and rounds, at least 50 rare coins, and a few literal silver bullets, firearm accessories, and more. With that, David Coker Jr. was arraigned yesterday in the 54A District Court on the following charges: conducting a criminal enterprise, a 20-year felony, 1 count of larceny by false pretenses in the amount greater than $100,000, a 20-year felony, for submitting to MDHHS the financial service report seeking grant dispersal to cover IW Consulting invoices totaling $820,000 without disclosing his ownership of the contracting firm. 2 counts of larceny by false pretenses, an amount greater than $100,000, for submitting each of 2 invoices on behalf of IW Consulting to the Complete Health Park nonprofit. 2 counts of embezzlement by an agent, more than $100,000, 20-year felony, for his acquisition of the grant funds as an agent of Complete Health Park nonprofit through each of the 2 IW Consulting invoices that were approved on behalf of Complete Health Park. And 1 count of safekeeping of public monies, a high court misdemeanor, punishable by a term of incarceration up to 2 years in duration. Contrary to a typical grant-making process where funding goes in search of a project, this occurred really in reverse, where the project was developed and set out in search of funding. Ultimately, Coker's funding solution was the creation of this legislative earmark into the state budget. These types of state earmark expenditures were, until recently, unfortunately, very common in every modern state of Michigan budget. Last term requests for everything from new fire trucks to local infrastructure projects to grants for privately owned community resources or non-governmental organizations were cloaked in secrecy, which made grants to nonprofits in their infancy or organizations with uncertain ownership or stakeholder pedigrees accessible to potential bad actors seeking to take advantage of this process. Now, I'd like to be clear, the vast majority of projects that are funded through our state appropriations process support valuable, much needed programming in our communities. And I've traveled the state visiting with grant recipients from all over, many folks involved in the opioid settlements who have been grant recipients. Just recently, some food banks, some nonprofit healthcare organizations that I just met with. And some of them are some incredibly, truly terrific organizations that exist in large part due to governmental funding, both state and federal. And they do great work. Like them, my office too benefits from this type of appropriation through the federal government, funding everything from our healthcare fraud division, which investigates Medicaid fraud, to our Operation Survivor Justice Program, which works to return cold case sexual assault defendants back to Michigan to face charges. Like those organizations all throughout the state, we know what a traditional grant process looks like, and we know that the old Michigan system was not that. Fortunately, and likely in response to the dogged reporting by, frankly, many of you in this room, last term, the Quadrant and State Budget Office came together to improve this process and enact much needed guardrails to improve transparency. And the State Budget Office now requires every legislative grant request to have a named sponsor, which is made public in the first few months following the start of the fiscal year. And then I believe Speaker Hall took it another step further by publishing all House requests in a publicly available website. Now, while my department is still actively investigating 2 other high-profile cases stemming from the old process, I'm very encouraged by these actions to bring more sunshine into the appropriations process and to support any further guardrails the legislature sees fit to prevent fraudsters from stealing our hardworking tax dollars. It's incumbent upon all of us in government to act as responsible stewards of the state treasury. And with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Jordan Rooney, Bridge, Michigan. Attorney General Nessel, are you disappointed at all in how DHHS handled this on this side of things? I mean, the feasibility study that was produced by Anthony DeMasi is a known felon. It does mention IW Consulting. It's state documents pretty easily available, readily confirm that Coker is a registered agent. Do you think DHHS should have been more proactive in catching this on the front end?
I would say that there are certain types of items that I think it would be really important for any of the agencies that are administering the grants to have in advance of the money, being conveyed. And one of the things I will say, for instance, is, I was concerned that there was no appraisal of the property and that $3.5 million was paid out for property that, you know, could it have exceeded that value? Possibly. Could it have been far less than that value? But this is state tax money. So if you're going to pay $3.5 million for a certain number of acres, should there not at least be an appraisal of some sort? Those are the types of things that I think I'd like to see. And what is, I think, different about this particular process than what I have seen in many, many other MDHHS grants. Typically, when I go around the state and I talk to people who are seeking these grants, they actually have complaints that are diametrically in opposition to what we see here, which is that it's too hard to get the money. That first they have to spend the money, and then later they have to seek, disbursement of the money to reimburse themselves, and that's a very difficult process. And I've actually had a number of nonprofits say sometimes they don't seek those state funds at all because it takes so long for them to receive it. So obviously there has to be a happy medium here where you're not just giving, over $9 million up front and having very, very little information about how that money is going to be spent. So, my hope is that, first of all, these guys did such an incredible investigation. I mean, I think it should be noted the hard work that they put in to find out what happened. And my hope is that there are going to be improvements made to the system based on some of the failures that we saw here. But I will say, with the vast majority of projects, this is not this is unusual, I would say.
Kyle Malin from MERS News. Attorney General, is there any proof at all that Mr. Coker did anything to advance the project at all to get this health park rolling?
No. I mean, we know that there was other monies that were paid out, and that money specifically, I would say, the total program expenses were $9,900,041.89. I'm sorry, $9,941,089. So those were the total program expenses that were paid out, and we know that the $820,000 or more that went directly to Coker. But in addition to $3.5 million for the property, you had capital expenditures and equipment that was about $5.4 million. Not all of that has been spent at this point, correct? And it's being held is in escrow. Is it being held right now? Okay. And that was to pay off somebody who was a draftsman for the plans or an architecture.
Construction company.
Yeah.
So there were some people who got paid outside of Mr. Coker for this project.
Correct.
Is the property purchased then?
The property's purchased, yes.
And who owns the property?
Well,
Complete Health Park. LLC.
Did you say a lawmaker came to DHHS?
yes, that's right. One of the concerns that was brought to the to DHHS about how this was being handled was a senator, and that was, sorry, not Senator Houck. Yes, that's right. Senator Houck came to the department and indicated that he had concerns about the project and the way it was being handled. And that was part of the genesis of the investigation, correct? Yeah. It's possible.
Yeah, Sheldon. Sheldon Cross, 910. Just wondering if you're able to share anything. Question there about Speaker Wentworth. Just if you're able to share anything about what you found about the role and also representative
So as we indicated, we didn't find any evidence of criminality. I would suggest that none of it looks very good. It looks bad that a project went to a former staffer of the speakers. We don't have any evidence that Mr. Coker had the requisite qualifications for a project of this type, and that under normal circumstances, if you were bidding out the project and you had a number of different entities that were bidding on this, would it have gone to somebody like Mr. Coker? I doubt it. But that's the way that unfortunately oftentimes things have been done in Lansing, where it's more about who you know than what your expertise is or your experience or your ability to carry out that project. Now, that's not always the case, of course. And we have many, as I indicated, we have many great organizations that receive state money and do a very good job with that money and fulfill the purposes of those grants. But clearly that wasn't done here. I have grave concerns, again, not from a criminality perspective. And I will say that Representative Coons was, cooperative with the investigation. But, I don't believe there's any way that this project, as it's described in the grant, could possibly have been completed with the $25 million that was appropriated. What would that mean? To me, likely that Mr. Coker would be going back to the state legislature to request more earmarks, to request more money to complete this project. And who might have been one of those people that he would have asked to sponsor such an earmark? Possibly Representative Coons, who had just gotten paid $3.5 million for his property. Now, is that illegal? No, it's not. Does it raise red flags? Is it ethically concerning? I would suggest yes.
Kyle Millennium from Merce. Did you guys get any assessment on how much that property was really worth?
I know we did some preliminary investigation into that.
There was no appraisal, obviously. There were prior sales, and that's of parts of that property was part of a larger parcel that were $50,000 an acre in 2018 and 2019. So the gap from there with a reasonable level of appreciation. So it wasn't grossly out of line with what the property had sold for before.
I have one more question if I could. So then is $9 million then the official amount of money that you believe was squandered here?
Well, when you say squandered, again, to me, there's the hope that there's remaining money that we may be able to get back that is still in the hands of some of the individuals who were paid but then did not complete whatever portion of the project was, part of their contractual obligations. But at this point, in terms of money that has been paid out, what is it, about 9.9 million?
Just to follow up on it, is there a way to get kind of just a full accounting of how much money the state could potentially get back? Could you get the land back?
Well, I will say this, and we'll get to that in a second. We did execute a number of search warrants on, for instance, the vehicles. So we intend to have those be a part of the criminal asset forfeiture in the event that we're able to successfully, convict Mr. Coker and to be able to prove that, there's a nexus between that property as ill-gotten gain from part of this conspiracy. In terms of the money that's outstanding or the property, Scott, do you have an idea of exactly how our department would like to handle that to try to reimburse the state for the money we're out?
Yeah, initially, that's going to be the responsibility of the grant administrator, the HHS, through their attorneys, which would be us, not my part.
Right.
They're flowing in other divisions.
So we have other attorneys, and this is not, the first time that we've been asked when you see money that apparently has been misappropriated for us to try by civil means to sue that entity and to get that money back. I would argue there's some element here of restitution as well. So I think it would, to make a good faith effort to get, at least this money, or not, at least the land in the back into the hands of the state, so that the state has ownership of it, would be reasonable.
Yeah, Rick. Did you say there were 2 other investigations?
Correct. One involved a grant that involved Global Link and Febe Dune was the recipient of that. So that case is outstanding. Another one involves an aerospace project. And the recipient is an individual by the name of Gavin Brown. We've not completed those investigations yet. Correct. Yeah. Well, when we complete those investigations, we can more fully respond to your questions. Well, I don't know that we're going to be able to answer those questions here at this presser here today. Hopefully that'll be information that's more fully disclosed during the course of a preliminary exam or possibly a trial. But, you know, I will say that there is a component of intent and knowledge. And in order to charge other individuals, you really have to be able to say that you knew for certain that Mr. Coker intended to misappropriate this money. And if there is some sort of good faith effort to provide the grant with the hope and the understanding and the expectation that the grant will be fulfilled and that this health park will be completed, then it's not a crime.
Jordan Hermey, Bridge, Michigan. I do just want to clarify it. So the charges here today mean that the investigation or probe is complete, or is anybody else or anything else still potentially under investigation with respect to this health park?
No, we've completed our investigation.
Sheldon? Yeah, Sheldon with 9 and 10. I think it was Greg that Greg news that pointed this out, but this is the third spring time in a row where there's been some, kind of high profile Lansing related, potential political corruption / funding case. I guess just kind of your thoughts on sort of what that reflects on the political culture kind of Michigan and Lansing.
Well, I've made no secret of the fact that I'd like to see a number of new laws put into place, right? I was an advocate of the many legislative components of the BRIGHT Act. I testified in response to that, I believe it was last year. And certainly, I think that these changes that were made by the State Budget Office, by the House and Senate, their appropriations committees were much needed. And to me, of the many things that we can do here at the Department of Attorney General, of course, we investigate and we prosecute cases of financial fraud and misappropriation of state tax dollars. But my hope always is to, in demonstrating what happened here and what went terribly wrong, that we learn from it and that we make the system better. And then again, that we be the best stewards possible of our state tax dollars and we respect our state taxpayers by doing that. And I really do think that the investigation of these cases, and really, credit where credit is due, some of you in this room did some pretty incredible work, I think, in terms of investigating yourselves some of these cases and splash them in on the front page of your outlets so that people became aware of it and demanded change. And I think many of those changes occurred. And there are some of the things I know that they now have in terms of oversight of the budget that had they occurred, it's just much less likely that anything like this would have ever happened. And again, there's a list of changes in the boilerplate language for this. Requiring a legislative sponsor to be disclosed in order for the grant to proceed, December deadline to submit legislative sponsorship documents to the State Budget Office, required grant documentation to be posted online by March. And SBO also made grant information available, I believe, prior to that, encouraging SBO to put it out in a single website, empowering the appropriate state agency to withhold or pause a grant for any impropriety by a grantee. applying these transparency requirements to earmarks across every general fund budget instead of just the enhancement grants. That's a key change to ensure previously hidden earmarks have to be disclosed. And I think this one really hits home for this case, explicitly limiting grant recipients to public entities and nonprofits properly registered for at least a year. And that's kind of a big deal. It's inexplicable to me that you would have some of these LLCs that seemingly, just come into being days, weeks, or a month prior to the appropriation being signed into law. I mean, to me, that's pretty obvious in terms of, you are putting together this company or this nonprofit purely for the reason that you're going to be receiving an earmark, as opposed to a longstanding organization who's done good work for many, many years. And usually that's what we're used to here. When we get, say, DOJ grants, is because we have a proven track record. First of all, we're the Department of Attorney General. So we've been around for a really long time. People don't have to be like, what's that? And we have a track record. We can show the work that we do and why any funding that we're seeking through a grant would further the mission of whatever that particular unit of the office is. But seeing how it was done here, where you have, again, this organization doesn't even exist. They have no track record. They can't show that they've done anything in terms of major projects that have been successful of this kind or really any kind at all. I mean, that is a major red flag. And so I was very glad to see that this was added to the SBO process.
Apologies for the late start. I have time for two more after I take time.
All right. Was Mr. Coker cooperative in the investigation?
I mean, he didn't flee the state. So
Did he sit down with an interview with you all? Or was he cooperative during the interview process, like Representative Coots and Representative Wentworth were?
can you answer that, Scott? No?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, it's right. He's presumed innocent unless convicted in a court of law, proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So,
Thanks, Matt. Seeing Jordan.
I was just curious if you were at all able to share what Senator Houck, you said, approached you about concerns over this. You able to share sort of what his concerns were, what prompted him to
Yeah.
ask you about
to be
this?
fair, he didn't approach the Department of Attorney General. He did approach DHHS to talk about his concerns. I don't know if there's anything more you want to say in regard to that. Yeah, I would only say, I believe from my review of the case that he intended to be helpful and he had genuine concerns, and I appreciate that.
All right, and we'll close out with that.
Attorney General, in court yesterday, when you were reading the charges with Coker, they said something to the effect that he received $820,000 for consulting services he could never have completed. I guess what led you guys to that?
For the billing period, if you go from when the grant started to the grant time that bill went in, it's physically impossible to complete that amount of work.
So for like the 2 week period.
Yes, you can't bill $820,000 in 2 weeks.
All right, thank you all very much. We will be having a digital press release out. I always say a time when nobody wants to take us for every day. I'm not going to do that to you this time, but it will be out. We're ready now.
Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
very much.